Devon traps his opponents by giving them an illusion of his arm strength. Most arm wrestlers fall into the trap by being determined by their wrist strength. The thing is, Devon always wins the hand and wrist battle. When someone goes against Devon, the first thing they feel is the height of Devon's leverage. Even though he doesn't have the longest arm among professional arm wrestlers, his opponent is determined by the amount of strength transmitted through their wrists. Since Devon always has the pronation, it will scatter the opponent's strength. When they hit, their wrist buckles back immediately. The amount of power coming out of their arm is limited by their weaker wrist. And that's how they fall into the trap. Gennady is a perfect example. He thought that he would have a chance against Devon's wrists, so Gennady decided to transmit his power using his cup, which, as expected, couldn't handle the pressure. That's why he changed his style in the next rounds to a flop press, so he will convey the power directly to Devon's arm without passing through the wrist. The chain is limited by the weakest oar and the last link. Devon doesn't take the wrist of his opponent completely. He gives them facial hope that they can regain their wrists again. He makes the match about the hand wrist by distracting them from using their full arm strength. Devon probably has the most gifted pronator teres muscle of anyone in the sport. It looks like an alien bump on his forearm. Whatever training he does, no matter how inefficient, will still yield great results. Another thing is, Devon is a defensive puller. His opponents focus on straightening his arm immediately after the go, which is actually a slight mistake. The closer Devon's arm goes to the pin pad, the more pronation he can apply to the opponent's cup. When they get closer to the pin, Devon pronates his entire shoulder, creating a rotational 8-cylinder engine. The elbow is the center of gravity. In addition to that, when his arm is being opened, the muscles move in negative motion, the eccentric phase, which is the strongest position of the muscle. Devon is a type of puller who runs away from his opponent's strongest move. He's not a containment-based arm wrestler like Levon. Devon has done enormous amounts of pronation work through the years that led to the permanent pronation of his arm. His arm became anatomically pronated in the resetting position. Imagine the amount of force required to supinate it during its contraction. We train in the hypertrophy range to put on muscles to get bigger, and we later condition those muscles. You can't train in the low-rep high sets with heavy loads forever. You need to train in the hypertrophy range in between. The neurological connection between his mind and the pronator muscle is such a mystery. The abundance of nerve fibers activates the most amount of muscle fibers possible. A slight contraction produces immense force. Every single fiber in his pronator is enlarged. Both characteristics are present in his pronator macrofibers and hypertrophy. The most guaranteed way against Devon is to establish hand control in the center and focus on extending his arm through back pressure instead of side pressure. If your pronator is stronger than your arm, then your back pressure will give out before your pronator. Arm wrestling is a sport of static strength. When you arm wrestle, you want to keep your arm angle posting back pressure and not get your pronation turned over. Pronation is used for two things: fighting the opponent's cup and taking their wrist in a top roll or a high hook. And for fighting their cup, you need static pronation to fight it, because dynamic pronation won't help much in stimulating the feel of someone aggressively cupping on your hand. And when you take someone's wrist, you lock your pronator in place and use your side and back pressure to take their wrist. Pronator is the defense against a cup. When someone actively cups, it targets your pronator res. If your opponent's cupping is stronger than your pronator, you will be turned palm up, which is a massive disadvantage. Only a small percentage of pullers are still effective when they turn their palm up. You can have all the cups in the world, but if someone is able to simply turn your palm up, then it doesn't matter. Devon is right now, since nobody has been able to turn his palm up since like 2019, and I wish we could test the max pronation torque without testing the bicep and without the fear of an injury, since it puts tremendous pressure on wrist tendons and ligaments. The further up the weight class you go, the larger the frame is. Heavyweights and super heavyweights guys are big and have just as big and thick hands, which make it difficult to establish a good grip and use cupping at its full might. So, the hook, which is really reliant on cupping, becomes a less preferred technique, and to pullers rule now. It depends on how you cup and depends on how you pronate. It's not simply pronate and cup because you can pronate through the opponent's hand or his fingers, and you can cup by pulling his hand or going through it. It's complicated to put it in words if you don't practice more, but more or less, people who know the difference know what I'm talking about. Devon does back pressure, which includes pronation, so it's not like he doesn't do it. He does, it's just with a focus on pronation. Pronation alone cannot open someone's hand if you are equal in strength. Devon in this situation is excluded because he trains it almost his whole life, which at that point is expected to get extremely strong. Building strength in one position does carry over to other positions. And if your pronator is freakishly strong in that position, then it's not going to be a slouch at other angles either. The objective of Devon's pronation lift is to isometrically train pronation, meaning it focuses on building resistance to supination rather than actively training pronation itself. The correct technique involves avoiding cupping and maintaining a neutral hand position. Criticism often arises when individuals lift their heels or rest their elbow on their thigh, as these actions make the lift easier but do not effectively engage the hand in resisting supination. Inability to replicate Devon's lift is often attributed to insufficient posting and overall back pressure strength, not a lack of pronation. It's important to recognize that lifting the weight serves the purpose of exerting pressure on the hand, while starting from a lifted position and maintaining it, as in having someone drop the weight onto your hand, may be even more effective. It is not as practical as Devon's approach. Back pressure can counter side pressure. You just need to angle yourself that way. See Devon's matches when he regularly used to open to prol. If your back pressure is just as weak as side pressure and you're still getting driven to the pad, then you have the case of strong wrist and hand but weak arm. Train back pressure. The brachioradialis assists pronation. It doesn't dominate it, and once you're in a neutral position, you're using the other pronators isometrically to maintain position, resist supination, and if you work a muscle that does some function, then you're working that function. If something pronates and you're strengthening it, you're strengthening pronation. The end range is difficult. Like with all movements, because muscles aren't as strong at the end range, you'll always do less weight because of that. He acknowledges that Levon possesses significantly more strength than him, but people tend to exaggerate their admiration for Levon. He has mentioned that if Levon's performance drops by 3% and he improves by 3%, there might be a chance for him to win. The outcome will depend on the condition of Levon's wrist, and unless Devon makes a significant improvement in the next 4 months, it won't be a close match if Levon is at full strength. I have been following arm wrestling for a long time, and the ultra hype this match has created is amazing. Devon sure knows how to sell. He is probably the best ambassador of the sport right now. The man loves the sport like crazy and does whatever he can to promote it.